hosted by the fearless McKenna Blackman. Get ready for a no-holds-barred journey into the soul of the Golden State. This show strips away the gloss to bring you raw, real stories, from sun-soaked SoCal to the streets of the Bay. Expect McKenna to dive deep with people, shaking things up, real activists fighting for change, and everyday locals living California's wild, unfiltered dreams. No scripts, no fluff, just bold conversations and true stories that capture the chaos and heart of this iconic state. This is California Unfiltered. Hit play and let's get started.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, hello. Obviously, I am not McKenna Blackman. I am a friend and fellow podcast host. My name is Danny Molina, and I hope you guys can enjoy my ugly mug. In the meantime, instead of McKenna, I'm sure she'll be back this next week. I'll be filling in for her tonight. Today, we have a very special guest, Mr. Michael Wynne. He's an attorney in Texas, and I can probably go on all day, but Mr. Wynne, care to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you?
Of course. Thanks for having me on. I moved to Texas about 32 years ago from Syracuse, New York area. Been here, was a federal prosecutor for about 12 years with McDermott, Will, and Emery. And I've been on my own since about 2016. I've kind of been in the right place at the right time for the 9/11 investigations, the Concorde crash, representing a foreign minister from Mexico, fugitive from Venezuela, and then handling a lot of election law recently following 2020. And just fortunate to get a lot of very interesting cases here. So pleased to join you this evening.
Yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate that. And I know that you have extensive legal knowledge. You're a Harvard Law graduate, which I'm sure is always something people probably bring up. But I was curious, maybe we can get your opinion, being in Texas and understanding that here in California, our government has recently decided to essentially redistrict our voting stuff through Proposition 50. And they keep talking about fighting back against Donald Trump, and they keep bringing up Texas as the reason as to why they are now going to gerrymander our state. So I don't know, are you able to give us some context in regards of what it is that happened in Texas and where there was maybe some legal gray area that's making our state now claim to be responding to that?
Look, and it's an unpopular position here in Texas, but I'm not in favor of this redistricting effort in the middle of the decade. It's been designed how it's designed for a purpose in response to the census, every decade. And personally, I think that's the way it should stay. We had quite an event here with the Democratic delegation leaving Austin for some period of time and then coming back. And there's very few ways to get around it, other than it's, politically motivated. And, I have a few friends who are the congressional delegation here in this state who are kind of the collateral, victims of how some of these districts are being redrawn, Democrat or Republican. And quite frankly, I'm looking at that case out of, I think it's the 6th district of Louisiana now, a district that was oddly shaped, in order to include African American voters. Now, I really think that your congressional districts, all your districts, need to be reasonable geographically based, for among other reasons, because it's very difficult. I've talked to several of them, for our Congress members to get around and see all their constituents. When you have, part of their district 50, 100 miles away from another part of their district, California or Texas, it's very difficult to go back and forth from D.C. to the districts every week. And I'll tell you, 95% of the work that your congressman, congresswoman does is not political. It has to do with getting funds for basic things that are just simply not controversial. Flood control, agriculture, whatever meaningful projects there are, basic constituency services, veterans benefits. A lot that goes on. We got 435 members of Congress. You see about the same four of them every Sunday morning. There's a lot of hard-working ones that you don't hear about, and these crazy districts make it very difficult for them to service their constituents. And I think a lot of this and real concerns, gets caught up in the political rhetoric.
Hmm.
So I'm against it, whether it's in Texas, California, wherever, because from there it's just going to go everywhere, and we're going to lose, the whole purpose, which is to
Right.
have real representation, in our legislature. So that's kind of where I am, and I know it's not a popular position here in Texas.
No, I appreciate that. I think a lot of Californians are really confused. I mean, I know you're in Texas, but living in California, you should see the propaganda being pushed through the television. I mean, just making it about fighting against Trump. And it's like, hello, you're taking the rights away from the people and you're putting it in the hands of these government officials that just want to maintain power. And I don't know, it's crazy to see. And in California, if you're not politically in the know, you watch TV and you think like, oh, I guess I got to vote yes on that, And it's just unfortunate, in regards to voting, we're getting some ballots. It's on social media. I see some people saying their ballot doesn't look like that, but I have seen clips of people showing their ballot and the little the envelope that we put our mail-in ballots into, and then they drop it to the corner and line up the paper just right, and you can see when somebody voted no. And I mean, I understand that that might not be the case for everybody, but the fact that it's the case for anybody, and then it brings me to the question of why do we even have these little holes inside of our envelopes that we're putting our mail-in ballots to? Have you seen anything like that in Texas, or had to deal with some? Is there some sort of law that says there has to be some sort of breathing room for the? I mean, I just don't. I can't imagine why those holes would exist. What are your thoughts on that?
Look, we haven't encountered anything like that yet. You know, the human mind is ever capable of finding ways to influence or corrupt any type of system. I hadn't heard of that, and I can't think right now of a logical reason why you would have a hole in it. Doesn't make any sense. I'd reach out to your state election board, or more likely your county election boards, and I'd look at some counties that aren't so heavily populated. Some of those county election officials are going to have an answer for you, and they're not going to be overwhelmed. So I'd look at some less populated counties, find an election
Hmm.
official, see if you can get an answer.
I see. I see.
That's what I would
Yeah.
do. But it makes absolutely no sense to me. Also, wonder who in the world has enough time in the day to turn an envelope on the side and look through a hole. Those
Yeah.
people need something to do.
Yeah, I mean, and
Pathetic.
I got to I
Pathetic.
got to tell you, it's hard sometimes as a regular person in California to distinguish between what's really going on and what is just, maybe one or two people experience that. And it's just interesting times that we're in because, yeah, why do those holes even exist? So many people are having discussions about, like, my ballot doesn't look like that. You're lying. And it's like, why do we have holes in the envelope? So thank you so much. I appreciate your take on that, Michael. Let me see. I wanted to ask you about what do you think? So how can I frame this for you? Okay, when the redistricting passed in Texas, was there any legal route that constituents who felt underrepresented by the passing of that legislation, is there something they can take to pursue legal action against the state?
You know, there really isn't, um, unless you can show some sort of dilution under sort of Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, um, or show, and even that has been adjusted over the course of the past couple of decades by the Supreme Court. there's just, I think, a question of standing you're going to have that's going to limit the ability of any group to show that their vote was somehow diluted.
Mm-hmm.
Statistically, that's an uphill battle, and frankly, I haven't heard of anybody here willing to take it on. I think the only challenge would be, trying to redistrict at a time other than immediately following the census, and I haven't heard anybody, willing to do that yet.
Mm-hmm.
But I
What
do
were
think it's a disturbing trend. It's a very disturbing trend. I mean, what are we going to do? Adjust it in real time, just like we do sort of Uber, price changes or your airline flights. You got one thing on Tuesday, different on Wednesday. It's crazy. And
Yeah.
we've got to stick to our tradition.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. And I know you're limited as far as what you can say about California, and your knowledge is uh, majority specific to Texas. So I'm curious to know, just looking at how what we're going through and how it relates to what happened in Texas. I guess I'm curious to know is, if this does pass in California, what are some things that happened in Texas that voters probably weren't really prepared for or nobody thought about? Was there anything of note in that regard?
Here it was. I was surprised how quickly it went through. We haven't felt the ramifications yet, because it's an off year. I think you're going to see that next year when we get around to the next, congressional voting cycle. I think that's when you're going to see your challenges come up.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, the national conversation every day is based upon one or two issues, and that's unfortunate. I don't think this one's really going to be manifest until, this time next year. And then we're going to see it all come out. And frankly, I don't see, California and the leaders there having much of a choice but, to react
Mm-hmm.
to the chess move that Texas has made.
Hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
it was quite a fuss here when the Democratic legislators left the state, and then it just died down, and they moved on to the next issue.
Mm-hmm.
So again, I don't think it's going to be ripe for argument and on the national consciousness until about this time next year.
I see. I see. So let's say this passes for us this year. Would we be on the same time scale, you think, or you think it would take 2 years for that to occur as well?
Oh, you'll be on the time scale. Your
I
your,
see.
your legislature will make sure it's on the time scale. Otherwise, it's self-defeating, right?
Yeah.
Make sure
Yeah.
it's the same. And then Wyoming jumps in, and then Indiana jumps in, then New York jumps, and it's just
Right.
free for all and be a big old mess.
So there's another, an unpopular opinion that I hear out here from some Republicans, actually, and they talk about how the map that was used to redistrict, it really takes 5 seats from us, right? I'm pretty sure it's only 5 seats that we're losing. However, it makes some districts more competitive, less favorable for the Democrats as well. So there are some Republicans that I hear preparing for it to pass and taking advantage of the things that nobody's paying attention to. Everybody's focused on these 5 seats, but there are other seats that now become more competitive for non-Democratic candidates. I was curious if that's something that Texas considered, was talked about. And I know you guys, you're saying you won't experience it until next year, but was that ever a topic that was brought up on your end in Texas?
Oh yeah, of course it was. Or also between and among Republicans, right? Who's going to get who's going to get the stronger seat and who's going to face a bigger fight, right? And it was interesting to see how that played out. Were the ones with stronger ties to different folks in the Senate legislature over in Austin, fared. So you might have one Republican is going to have a bigger fight and another one who gets a stronger district. Of course it was. It's all sort of played out behind the closed
Hmm.
doors. Yeah.
Hmm.
And I don't know how that's going. I'm sure it's going on in California too, where somebody's going to get a more secure spot than it. But then again, what are we talking about? More secure spots. Um, I don't think that was the intention when our founding fathers, created this system. Um, not secure or safe spots. You need to have representative spots, and I know that sounds and it is kind of naive these days, but if we're ever going to get on track, we got to get back to our founding principles, and we're nowhere
Hmm.
close. Just gaming the system, that ain't democracy. That's just not. It's a big old chess game, and we got to rise above it. I don't know how the hell we're going to do it, but we got to get some common sense here. 'Cause this ain't getting any better.
What are your thoughts on, because you said it and I agree, where this, if this passes in California, then the next Republican leaning state will do it, then the next Democrat leaning state will do it, and then it just becomes this whole debacle where it's really the people in power who are simply redistricting their areas so the vote isn't actually represented. Um, what are your thoughts on how we stop that or slow it down, or what does it look like when it all gets redistricted in 10 years?
Well, I'll tell you what I think it looks like. Every 4 years, we hear these complaints about the Electoral College, right? And you win a state, you get all of that state's electoral votes, right? And so if you keep going in this direction, you're going to have enough statistical wizards to be able to sort of gerrymander every single state so that all the delegates, or a majority of them, or all your Congress members of Congress, are from one party. And then you're going to pervert the makeup of Congress, and you're going to have the same arguments as you do where you have minority rule, and we complain when, maybe properly, maybe not, when the person who wins the electoral vote is not elected to the presidency, as we've seen several times
Hmm.
this century. But we're creating it ourselves, and the only cure is congressional legislation, if not a constitutional amendment.
Hmm.
Constitutional amendment is really difficult, but this might be one area we might want to get ahead of the trend and consider something like that, because it's not going to be good for anybody, right? Every move
Hmm.
is going to be countered by another move, and then you're a Republican in California or you're a Democrat in Texas, wherever, is going to feel aggrieved, and they should feel aggrieved, because they're not getting represented.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that is, I'm in California. I definitely lean more right. Um, and I keep trying to talk to people like, this isn't a fight against Trump. It's stripping all of us of our rights. People aren't moving from Florida to California. That's not happening. But then you look at the California map and you see how red it got.
Yeah.
That's what they're trying to adjust. That's what they're trying to fix. And I keep trying to tell people, imagine having a supervisor that is horrible at their job, a horrible leader, and instead of fixing themselves so they can be a better leader, they just make it so nobody hears you complain about it ever. That's like what this is. That's what this feels like. But I feel like I'm in the twilight zone because I talk to people and they're so focused on fighting against Trump when we have our own king here in California named Gavin Newsom. So it's
Well,
interesting.
just the way you put it, Newsom, or those associated with him. I try to speak in gentlemanly terms, but you talk about fixing the demographic changes that are going to occur when people come to or leave a given state. Let's look at the underlying facts, the underlying situation, what has happened. People move, they move for a reason, right? They are entitled to be represented from the area to which, they moved. That's not a problem to be fixed. Roads crumbling, bridges crumbling, flood control. Those are problems to be fixed. This ain't. This doesn't. Fix is just the wrong verb, and the very fact to use it, you know, it's telling. And you're right. If you want to appeal, and you're Gavin Newsom, wherever you are, you want to appeal to a broader populace based on the changing constituency and makeup of your state and the changing problems, and yeah, you know, I guess to the extent change yourself or get out of the game if you don't feel like you're the right person anymore. Just
Hmm.
get out. Let
Right.
somebody who feels like they are do it. Maybe he can't get another job. I don't know. I don't know the guy.
Yeah. Well, it's been interesting, being somebody in California that talks about leaving and moving, and I have a wife and kids, and um, I like my city. I like being here. I own property here. I think that all of this craziness that happens in California, it's not exclusive to California, but this seems to be one of the breeding grounds for all of the craziness. And I try to tell people all the time that the issue that we have in our country, in my opinion, is that the people are not wielding the sword of the authority that we actually have.
Hmm.
We are supposed to hold the power. But what happens is we elect these people and they stay up there for decades. And then it's like no matter what they do or what they say, people just bow down and listen. People are like I tell people, they don't have to take away the First Amendment if they convince you to willingly silence yourself. If you're afraid to speak and say your opinion, then they don't have to take the first. You're doing it for them. And I try to tell people that we have to show up. We have to show up. We have to get involved because in California, the reality is that it feels like our government doesn't really care to represent us. They're
Hmm.
focused on the minority demographics. They're focused on the demographic that they can easily push victimhood culture through. But the regular working parent, mom and dad, our politicians are not representing. This is not representative of America. I went to war. I fought for this country. This is not
Thank you, sir.
representative of the country that I fought for. And it's very upsetting. It's very upsetting for me. And I just, I have a podcast as well. And I talk to people. I tell people I have podcasts every day where I meet somebody and just start talking to them. And I want to know what's going on with our country and what people think. And what's going on in California isn't necessarily exclusive to California, but things seem significantly worse than when I joined the military in 2008 than it is right now. I don't know what your stance is on that, but yeah, as an American, it's frustrating.
It, you know, it is frustrating. And here's the thing: we've all, and I feel it, become too insulated, too isolated, too prone to what's called, I think, confirmation bias. Also, our main news sources, um, and I get confused about what the term mainstream media is because the folks who complain about that are on every night anyway. So I don't know why you're. I enjoy Gutfeld, I really do, but I mean, come on, what is mainstream media? Okay, you all are part of mainstream media by this point. You've been around long enough. So, but the thing is, we all listen to our shows, we all travel in our circles, and we don't engage in that interesting conflict and discourse face to face, one on one, get to know our neighbors. And I think that has contributed a lot to what you've described is just the lack of community. I was talking to a friend of mine this morning over breakfast, and this new generation and the idea of community service. We're talking about the Houston Rotary Club, which I'm now president of, and trying to convince a younger generation just to get involved in service, just for service sake, not to make money. And there's something special about that this country was built on, and that's what we're really lacking. Now, Donald Trump, opposition Donald Trump, I mean, you got what, 3 years most, and the way our political cycles runs, the force of that's going to be over after the in a year, right? And he's going to be, like it or not. Sorry, Donald, you're going to be a lame duck. Hope you're not watching. I doubt you are, but you are, and you know it, right? So we got to look beyond that. We got to look beyond that, and he, just like Barack Obama, is a once in a generation type of political force, or Bill Clinton. And, he will have moved on, and the rest of us will still be here. That said, our country has been through worse and much harder times. And we fought a civil war, and we've had big problems. And we'll weather this as long as we get to the source, I think, of the problem. That is the isolation that's come about because of how we live our lives and the absence of community, social media, and one issue, cable news television. And that's the problem. That is the problem. You know.
Let me ask you this, because you talked about getting young men more activated and things like that. How I have an issue with. I agree. I wish young men would get up and get activated. And you look around in our country right now, and you have one end of the extreme, these Antifa characters, and then you have the Republican side of the extreme that's just brand new coming out, these groypers, these young kids who identify as groypers. And I keep telling people that this is just young American demographic who feels disenfranchised.
Mm-hmm.
For years, they haven't been represented. They keep being told to step up and stand. And I'm part of that, where I tell them, hey, you got to show up. But a lot of these guys, they can't even buy a house. They can't move out of their mom's basement. I see a lot of right-wing people blaming the left for our youngsters shifting towards socialism. And my response is always, well, what has the right done to suck them back? We keep pointing the finger at each other. And I am very passionate about getting the youth involved and getting them activated. And not even, I tell people, you don't even have to agree with my beliefs, but zoom out and see what's going on and get up and get involved and join your side. Because right now, everybody's been tricked. The regular, everyday people is tricked into, well, don't get political. Just be normal. People talk about politics as if it's some virtual thing where they're like, oh, well, I'm a registered independent. You're sidelining yourself. This is a two-party system, and all of these Americans that constantly talk about the issue are standing on the sideline watching the weirdos play the game. And it's like, the only people who seem to be running for these positions are people who are malleable, who can be their integrity is rocky. I mean, it's not the best of the best that's running for these positions. It's just not. And it's so obvious and clear, but our youth, our young men, they don't even identify with our country anymore, it feels like. How do you think we fix that? How do we pull them back?
Yeah, that's and I think the identity politics focus on, let's just say it, transgenderism and those kinds of issues. I think that's what sunk the Democratic Party in the last election nationwide. I mean, that was it. But your younger generation, I see, is searching. I think it comes back to the same thing: social isolation, and are living on our computers too much, looking for something to which to identify, some group to cling on to, both on the right. God bless them, your Charlie Kirk groups, and may he rest in peace. But you see that, and then you see the groups on the left, and the two shall never meet. And you listen to the same thing and the same, podcast or program every single day. It's going to be ingrained, and
Mm-hmm.
that's what's happened. I think the only solution is, as we always have had in this country, is a grassroots one. And before I forget, it's also a matter of economic opportunity, right? And I run a
Mm-hmm.
business. I'm guilty of it too, right? Our economics and our business management has become so good that we can identify and optimize our profits on every little office supply and everybody who comes to work for us. And what's lost in that is the idea of leadership and mentorship and raising the next generation. And we have to come back to that and be willing, to sacrifice a little bit of the bottom line in order to raise up and give these people, younger people, an opportunity to move out of the parents' house, get your hard knocks, and grow and become men, become women, productive members of society. We can't coddle them anymore, and that's what we do too much. We coddle, coddle, coddle. Parents do the homework, and all these other things we do. I don't have to list them all, but just freaking grit. We need to get back to it. I don't know if it's
Mhm.
going to take another crisis, a war, who knows what, you know, pull us all through. I sure hope not. I sure hope
Yeah.
not. If I had the
Yeah.
answers, well, no, I wouldn't be running anyway because the salary differential. That's another thing. I don't know how we do it, but we got to bump up the salaries to make you know well qualified people want to give up their jobs and then endure the 24/7 scrutiny and criticism.
Hmm.
You know, you
Yeah.
know.
I am. I tell my local elected officials that, hey, I'm critical of everybody, and I don't envy you.
You
Because
don't want to
I
take their
get it.
place. I mean, no, I got the twice elected DA for Harris County is in my office now. My law partner right next door. She's left already for the evening, but yeah, I mean, she was trying to do the best she could, but the personal attacks, this, that, and the other thing. You have somebody just trying to do their job, and and especially at the local level, we got to cut some people a break, and make. I don't want to run. Heck no. I got a girl in elementary school. I don't want to expose her to that.
Right.
So
Yeah.
who do you get? You got the fringe extreme folks who have nothing better to do and can't get a job who are running.
Yeah. That's true. That's
And
true.
then they're trying to carve up the state so that they even have more power and knock out the ones who do want to run, circling it back.
This is
So I don't know. It's a
this,
cultural and it all boils down to economics, as it does all the time. Create opportunity for young people, hope, vision, um, and then we'll start seeing some change.
I love it. I love it, Mr. Wynn. Hey, lastly, where can more people learn about you or follow you? Do you have a social media at all for your professional business?
Well, look, our law firm does. I haven't got much on Twitter or Instagram yet, but it's www.gwafirm.com, and we post articles and news commentaries there, and also the victories that we're getting more and more often as a law firm, and I'm working my day job. So www.gwafirm.com, and let me know if you ever get to Texas. Take you out
All
for
right.
some barbecue.
Oh, nice.
All right.
Nice. I'm going to take you up on that, Mr. Wynn. I promise you.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Everybody who's listening, thank you so much for tuning in. And until next time, we'll see you guys later.
All right. See you.